Welcome to the Sixth Wheels Consulting Podcast, dialoguing disability and discussing difference, inclusion, and all abilities in today's world. Now here are your hosts, Matthew Shapiro and Bob Nolly.
Ladies and gentlemen, you found your way back to us. This is episode 5 of the Sixth Wheels Consulting Podcast. This is Bob Nolly with your host, Matthew Shapiro. How are you?
I'm great, Bob. How are you? It's hard to believe.
Now I'm doing much better. So how's your week so far?
It's been crazy. It's been very crazy. Just, continuing to grind it out with work and, always looking for new opportunities for work and to continue to get the message of Six Wheels out. And I think that will play very nicely into tonight's conversation. I think we had a plan to talk about employment and entrepreneurship. So
don't tell people we plan. If they, if they know we planned, then, it'll sound like we rehearsed, and then the magic will be gone from everywhere. But you have said the four-letter word. You've said the four-letter word. Do you remember there's an old, I was kind of an aficionado of game shows. And I mean old game shows, not game shows that are on now. And one of the very first that was on TV was like an extension of the career of Groucho Marx, the comic. And he made all those funny movies that perhaps many of our listeners had never heard of. But on his game show, it was a little low-key quiz show where couples would come out and he'd talk to them and they'd say things that would allow him to crack jokes. And they could answer some questions and make a little bit of money.
Sure.
But he had this one feature where his trademark, the duck, would come down from the ceiling at the beginning of the show with a word dangling from its beak. And it's the secret word. And if any of the couple said the secret word, they'd win $100, which was a huge amount of money back then.
Sure.
So that's like you've said the secret word and the jackpot's been hit. So everybody go out to Google and look for Groucho Marx and the secret word, and you'll see a picture of a duck smoking a cigar with a word dangling from his mouth.
Yeah.
And Matthew has won the cash. So, all right.
I'm the winner. Awesome.
So when, at any time before you started to put Six Wheels together, where you had the dream and the vision to do the work that you're doing now, did you ever go out into the job market for a traditional, job working for somewhere else?
Yeah. So just like anyone else, I graduated from school and knew at the time that I wanted to work in the disability space, knew that I wanted to be in that arena. And I went within that arena, I went kind of the traditional route of trying to find jobs at, independent living centers and other places where, people with disabilities who wanted to work in that space could have that opportunity. And I did a lot of things where, I sent in a lot of resumes and had lots of interviews, but was kind of coming across and running across a challenge that I think a lot of people with disabilities face, right? And that is employment and not being able to find a job that, one, they liked and one that they could be passionate about. And I think, employment is always a conversation that when I'm around the table at disability events or I'm, doing the work that I'm doing, employment is always a situation that we talk about, and how can we improve that for people with disabilities so that we don't have people, rather than sitting at home on the couch after they, particularly graduate from high school, and maybe some of them choose to go on to college, some of them don't. We've got to get people in positions where they can be doing things in the community from an employment standpoint, and that's often hard to find. I think a lot of the areas are improving, but we still have a very high unemployment rate for people with disabilities in this country. We still are doing a lot of the same things where people with disabilities are. There's kind of this idea within the disability community that people with disabilities only work in certain environments, and it's called food, flora, and filth, and hospitals. So basically, that means that a lot of jobs for people with disabilities are in restaurant settings. They're working with flowers and different things like that. They're working in hospital settings, and they're doing things like, picking up trash after a day. They're on a night crew and picking up trash. Now, let me stop for a second and say that if somebody with a disability wants to work in those spaces, I'm by no means saying don't do that. What I am saying is it's very limiting, or we as a society are very limiting about the types of jobs that we are willing to offer to people with disabilities, and that they're willing to want to explore. One of the things that I always talk about is, and again, obviously a lot of these things that we talk about on the podcast are your and my opinion, and some people can respectfully agree or disagree with the stances we take. But my argument has always sort of been, why are we not trying to think outside of the box for employment outcomes? And you often ask, what are the young people with disabilities, or what is this person with a disability interested in? And so they might say, I wanna be an athlete. And so that person may not be able to be the next LeBron James, so to speak, and maybe they are if they're really talented, who knows. But so we figure out, okay, we know that they want to work in sports, so let's figure out a unique way for them to be part of a sports franchise, whether it's being a ticket taker at sporting events, or being an usher in those certain areas, so that they're around that sport or around that thing that they're interested in. They might not be directly the athlete, but they're involved in that space. And I think a lot of times, people say, Matthew can't be a surgeon, or Matthew can't be an astronaut because he has a disability. And like I said, yeah, I might not be able to be the direct surgeon who's working on patients and doing surgeries, or I might not be able to be the astronaut, but I can be involved in that space where I'm doing something for NASA, or doing something in a hospital setting that would foster that interest in that job or field. And I don't think we do a strong enough job of sort of thinking in that approach.
So let me paraphrase for a minute and jump in here. You said that many times the disabled, when they go look for a job, will be funneled, forced, limited to food, flora, hospitals, or trash.
Correct.
Okay. But I imagine there may be some people in there that don't have the hope of getting a job, and just the idea of taking a job in any of those areas would be an accomplishment, perhaps even fulfilling somewhat to be able to go do that. But that having been said, I think what we're trying to say is, don't put a ceiling on what you can aspire to.
Exactly. And
try to find something that is self-actualizing for you as it could possibly be.
Right. And one of the things that I sort of tied to that, right, is, and we may, I think we've talked about this on a previous episode, but, putting people with disabilities in positions of power, right, whether that be, eventually being like politicians, or, why couldn't people be CEOs of Fortune 500 companies? And that speaks exactly to your point of, don't put a ceiling on somebody's hopes, desires, and dreams when it comes to employment, right? Because we all want to have the ability to have that upward trajectory. And I want to reiterate again, by no means am I saying I don't want people with disabilities working in these fields, because that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if they want to work in those fields, by all means, please do. Sometimes I feel like we as a society don't give them the awareness or the knowledge to know that there are other options out there, and there are other options available to them. And so just having a broader discussion and understanding of really getting down to what are Matthew's interests, and what are ways that we can cultivate that interest to make Matthew very passionate about his job, and do certain things. But by no means am I trying to limit one's employment outcomes to just those that we mentioned, for sure.
Sure. So for somebody that really would like to get a job, not for the money, perhaps, or maybe that they need the money, but just to get a job, do you have any resources that you recommend to people to use to find a job that might fit their needs?
Sure. So there's lots of ways that one can find a job, right? And it's funny, I actually did a presentation on this about a week ago, and just like anyone else who would be looking for a job, obviously there are disability resources available, like the Department of Rehab Services, also known as DARS, which could help you find jobs. But then also just look around your local communities and see who's hiring, see what kind of what your local Starbucks might be doing, or a lot of times there's bulletin boards to where it says people, we're looking to hire, and that could be some unique ways that you can find jobs. Think about places that you already volunteer for. A lot of the good work that a lot of us do started out as, I was volunteering with the organization and loved the work that I do. See if those places have full-time paid employment. Try to think of creative ways to find that job employment outcome for you as an individual. One of the things I would also say, and I would challenge parents more in this regard, and that goes back to what we were talking about a minute ago, but don't limit your child's desire to, or your student's desire to work in a certain field, right? Like don't stifle that person's creativity or desire to want to be a chef, or desire to want to work in a daycare or work with children, because you might think that their disability would not allow that to be the case. As I said, if we're able to, maybe they won't directly be the doctor or the chef, but maybe they can work in a kitchen setting or be around the area. And so I think part of that also ties back to the willingness of the parents to be creative and outside of the box thinkers. With my work, I have a supportive system, and family system that, says wherever we need to travel to in order to allow you to do the thing that you love to do, we will figure out how to make that work.
Now, at the risk of making people feel that they are without, can you share as much as you're willing to, what your support system looks like?
Yeah. So obviously, very fortunate to have both my parents still around and driving me crazy. And I have an older brother who I'm 27 and he's 30. So there's a three-year age difference there. And then also I have a wonderful sister-in-law. And, a lot of times when I have to travel for the work that I do, my mom is my companion and or my driver and or my note taker and all of the above. So, without the support of both my parents and my brother and my sister-in-law and my extended family, I don't think I would be successful. And my mom always says, in a lot of cases, she says, "Yeah, I see what you're trying to do, and let's figure out what the next adventure is, and we'll figure out how to get there and make it work." We talked about travel, or hopefully people have listened to our recent travel episodes. But after that long trip, I immediately turned around and had 3 or 4 business trips that I had to go on to speak at certain conferences and to do some career development for me, to take some courses and things. And my mom was right there to help make sure I could get there and get there safely, and be at that support system. So, I'm very lucky, and I know there are a lot of people out there who have amazing support systems as well. Like I said, I would just challenge all people in the support system to trust that your individual with a disability can surprise you if you give them the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I bet you've really painted the picture of a wonderful opportunity for you. Now, if somebody is does not have that family support, let's turn your back on your household right now and look outside the walls of your home.
Sure.
Where could you point others that go, I just need a little help?
Yeah, and that's another way that we talk about that within like the disability world is another way of putting it is like those natural supports that are in place. And so you might not have, that direct family connection that we were just talking about, but one of the other things I'm really fortunate to be able to have is great friends and support systems in that way. So whenever I know I need something from an employment standpoint or, want somebody to leave a comment or something about the work that I'm doing, I've got a great support system that like I can lean on that's outside of the family unit. As far as like other avenues and things, I think building those natural supports so you're not solely reliant on your family to be that cheerleader will do a number of things, right? Like it will broaden your social circle. It will allow you to develop those social skills that are so important, which then helps in an employment setting, right? Because you have to be able to translate those social skills to an employment setting. When you are lucky and are in a great employment setting, you have to be able to navigate that employment world, which can be tricky. And you develop those things with having those natural supports and with hanging out with friends and family outside, or hanging out with friends more in particular outside of that family environment.
Let me tell you, you're absolutely right. Those interpersonal skills and those social skills actually come up pretty near the top of the stack in the skill set that employers are looking for. And it's almost like in every resume that ever has been written, people go, communication skills, excellent, written and oral. And, that's just not true. Because we all don't write, we all don't speak excellently.
Sure.
But we all say that. But that is one thing that really will differentiate you one way or the other. Hey, we've got somebody on the Facebook page wrote us a question. Our good friend, I'll just call her Emily D. So yeah. Emily D's got a question for us, and you can have a question too. Go to the Six Wheels Facebook page and please post a question there you can ask, and we'll give you a shout out, show you some love on the show here. It's good. So Emily D, tonight's your night. How about that? She asked this question, and this is very thoughtful, I thought. This is why I plucked this one out. So with work, how do you balance dependence on others against the sense of freedom and independence, especially in your situation when you're living with your family? So how do you balance that dependence on them and any others you rely on? Yeah, with that sense of freedom and independence.
Yeah, so I think a huge key to that, particularly in an employment setting and really in a personal setting too, is like knowing those boundaries, right? Like, and knowing in particular settings you're able to act in particular ways. And that's not saying that like I want I would tell people to act like differently or whatever, but in some
you want to be genuine. You certainly want
to. You want to be genuine, and you want to be, yourself in all of the certain settings, right? But there are different selves. Like I act differently when I'm in a work setting than when I'm with my friend of 15 years and we're cutting a rug and being obnoxious 20-somethings, right? But you have to sort of like I'll use the example of my mom and I, right? Like in certain business settings, my mom knows to hang back, be the note taker, not say a whole lot. And then, maybe after that, we're able to have a conversation, or if she didn't understand something or I didn't understand something, we're able to have those conversations with one another outside of that work setting. But that's not necessarily brought up immediately in that setting. And like another example is when I've, say it's not my mom who's my attendant, right? Because I've had other attendants with me in work settings. And so you find that balance of like, in this situation, do I need my attendant's help to be the note taker here? Or can I figure out a solution that would allow me to handle things independently. And that really just comes with, a lot of practice and a lot of, knowing what my strengths and my weaknesses are as an individual, and being able to sort of implement those in a work setting for sure.
That's a great answer to Emily's question there. And, I'll remind you that, or I'll remind our listeners that when I first met you at 1 Million Cups, I actually ran into your mom there, who was there that day too, and we actually went to high school together.
Sure.
And at no time during our greeting one another, your mom and I, did she mention that she was there with you?
Sure.
She was sitting in the back of the room with a cup of coffee and notebook, just letting things happen.
Sure.
And
sure.
The whole event, every relationship, getting from this piece of the floor to that piece of the floor, getting the slides done, and that was all you. And that's a great answer to that question.
Yeah, people are very good at learning how to be inconspicuous and know when they're needed and know when to sort of hang back. And my mom's a perfect example of that.
Yep, good. Oh, that's sweet. So let's say, somebody doesn't really want to work for someone else. They'd like to do something. They do have that entrepreneurial spark. And
sure.
Of course, we hold you up here as a prime example of that with all the work you have underway, the consultancy, the lobbying, and everything that you take on there. When did that light bulb go on? What did it look like?
Yeah, so before I'm going to circle back to that, because I want to hit on a really important point, and I bring this up all the time when I'm talking about employment and employment for people with disabilities. Very rarely do we and do the people who are involved in employment decisions for people with disabilities, very rarely do we talk about entrepreneurship as an avenue to help decrease that employment gap that is in place for people with disabilities. And that has always baffled my mind, that we're not trying to instill that entrepreneur spirit into people with disabilities, because that could really help to reduce the unemployment gap for that population. But so often I have to be the one to really bring that up at the table when we're talking about employment, and it always makes me scratch my head, because I think there are a couple of reasons that people are sort of hesitant to do that. One is the fact that they think that it's a lot of work to get a business started. And don't get me wrong, like for me, it took me a little while to do certain things, but they think there's a lot of challenges of like, do I get the business license, and how do I get a logo, and how do I do a website, and all of this stuff. And to be very honest with you, a lot of that stuff was very simple. Now, I will say I'm a go-getter, as most of our listeners know. And I was driven to do that. But like for me to get my LLC status, I went online to the government agency that deals with LLCs. I can't think of it off the top of my head. I apologize. But State Corporation Commission. There we go. It came to me. And each state has their own State Corporation Commission website. And in a lot of cases, you're able to go online and fill out your information to get an LLC status. And I was able to print my certificate the same night I started the paperwork. I was able to use my resources to help me develop a website and develop a brochure and develop all sorts of things. It wasn't. I often feel that people get intimidated by the thought of starting their own business, but I will tell you, it's one of the happiest decisions I ever made. And I'm glad that I decided to go down that route. I want to circle back to your original question of like, how did this all come about? And I think we touched on this a little bit in our intro episode, But, it really was a situation where I was laying in bed one night and I had this great epiphany of let me take all of my knowledge and experience that I've gained in all of my years of doing advocacy work and doing public speaking and doing lobbying work and try and turn that into an entrepreneurial venture. And there are a number of reasons why I decided to go down this route, right? One is, and they're all kind of funny, right? Because I think that I'll have job security because I don't think I'm going to be firing myself anytime soon unless something really weird occurs and I end up firing myself, which would just be bizarre. And then two, like, one of the things that I really enjoy about having Six Wheels is that it's mine, right? And like I have ownership of this entity, and not physical ownership, but like it's that mindset ownership of like, it's mine. I put the work in to make it grow, to make it be successful, and that makes the rewards that much sweeter, and that makes every time I get a paycheck, no matter how big or how small it is, that much more sweet. Because
one of the golden moments for sure, I think we both agree, is when you get your business cards. And whether you got them from Vistaprint, you shouldn't say that since, they're not, or Moo or somewhere like that, and you have them in your hand. Have you made a cent yet? No. Have you done anything yet? But there it is. There's the entity right there in your hand.
Yeah.
Something that's tactile you could share with everyone else. And then you talked about owning the business, never getting fired. When you wake up in the morning, if you wake up to music or an alarm clock, or you just wake up naturally, there it is in your face. As soon as your eyes flutter open, there it is. If you're listening right now, just put your hand in front of your face, right up to it, so you can barely see between your fingers. That's what it's like. When you open your eyes in the morning, there it is. There's no going away. There's no calling in sick.
Right. And
it's quite an empowering feeling.
It's your day-to-day grind, right? And like I said, you put in as much blood, sweat, and tears that you want to put in to make your business grow. And it's so funny, I'm sitting here as we're recording, as we record all of these episodes, I kind of do them in the same place in my room. And one of the things that is always staring at me right in the face on my desk, I pick my head up from my desk. I'm looking at my computer, and I'm able to pick my head up from my desk and see the first paycheck that I got, or the first payment that I got as the Six Wheels Consulting entity. I made a copy of that first check that I got, and it's still in front of me today, and it's a motivator for me every day to know that I need to keep grinding. I need to keep pushing to grow my business. And it's just a really cool motivator to sort of look at every day as I'm sending hundreds and hundreds of emails and, having meetings with potential clients. And it's a heck of a motivator for sure.
Absolutely. And don't you ever move that. You leave that right there. You could go into small businesses anywhere from barbershops to, taverns, and you'll find more often than not, you'll find this little framed dollar bill.
Sure.
Up there somewhere that's prominent. And that's, they're keeping that first dollar in front of their eyes as well. So, I don't know if you had to avail yourself of this, but we have another question. And our good buddy, Daniel M., he went to the Facebook page. He dropped this question on us. And he said, are you aware of any organizations or angel investors that encouraged the disabled to create startups? Because many times people think, well, you have to have money to make money. You
Sure.
can always bootstrap your business, but are you aware of any organizations or angel investors that are open to that?
So first of all, as an entrepreneur myself, as we've said, I would love angel investors and different things to help grow my business, and particularly have a focus on helping entrepreneurs with disabilities grow their businesses. But I don't know of any particular entities like that are solely focused on that front. One thing I can tell you, we talked about the Department of Aging and Rehabilitative Services, DARS, a little earlier in tonight's episode, or today's episode, depending on when you're listening to it. And one of the things that I was really fortunate enough through DARS they have a small business sort of entity or individual that works with, people with disabilities to help them start small businesses. And I actually went through the process of working with this gentleman. I had to develop a business plan. I had to develop cash flow projections. I had to do kind of all of this stuff. And once I was able to do that, and I was able to ask for a grant, or I guess another way of saying it was some angel funding from the Department of Aging and Rehab Services to start my business. So they helped me pay for printing of my new business cards and my brochures, and they helped me get my website redeveloped so that it was accessible and inclusive to the disability population, because how ironic would it be if I was a disability consultant and my website wasn't inclusive and accessible? They helped me do a lot of things, and so that was one way that I was able to get some funding to help grow the business some off the bat. And I was fortunate enough that I also had some inheritance from my grandfather, and I decided to take some of that money, my own personal money, to start it as well. But as far as like other entities that are angel investors or things like that, I don't know of anything off the top of my head. What I would suggest to Daniel and to other people who are interested in doing entrepreneurship is immerse yourself in entrepreneurship, immerse yourself in the world. And one of the greatest things I can tell people to do is to network. Because
would you say that one more time? Because that is the whole point of the sermon tonight. Absolutely.
Sure. One of the greatest things I can tell anyone who is interested in entrepreneurship to do is to network. And networking is such a vital part to helping to grow your business, to establish relationships, because in a lot of situations, for me in particular, when you're starting out, you kind of work not all situations are you're going to get paid for, or you're going to pay somebody to help with. A lot of situations could end up in trades, right? Where it says, like, I'll help you do this if you help me do that. And so that helps both businesses grow based on the particular strength and weakness of each individual that's kind of part of that trade. So, if you're able to network and find those connections, not only will those trades occur, but then those people will also connect you to other people who could help with finding you potential paid gigs where you're making money and you're growing your business, or helping you with just other resources that you might need as a new business owner.
Well said. Well, my friend, that's a wrap. You got any parting words for everyone?
Well, like I said, tonight's the episode, we really wanted to focus on employment and entrepreneurship. And, real quick, I just want to encourage all people to find a job that they are most comfortable with, and to, again, encourage family members and support systems of individuals with disabilities to not be afraid of letting Matthew or Johnny or Sarah, go out and seek the type of job that they are hoping to look for. And if you think entrepreneurship is the route that you are interested in going, don't be afraid and don't be nervous to take that leap of faith, because it is a giant leap of faith to start your own business. Because if you're, when you're able to make it successful, it's that much sweeter, because it's yours, it's your baby, and to see it grow and to blossom, you will just feel 100 and 1,000 times better about yourself, because you put the hard work in. And I really just want people with disabilities to be employed and to be important members of our communities and to make a difference like we all do.
Well said. We'll let it go at that. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to episode 5 of the Six Wheels Consulting Podcast. Please join us next time. And until then, keep rolling forward and think inclusion. We'll see you then.
Absolutely.